He's your uncle. He's my uncle. He's our Uncle Sam. Hey. Let's hear a little bit for Uncle Sam. Has everybody paid their taxes? Anybody have a fear of April 15? We're going to tell you a little story here. Never know how much you hurt them. Never know how much you care. When you drop the bombs upon them, you walk away like you're just not there. You give them fever when you hurt them, fever when you tell all those lies. Fever in the morning, fever that hides all the light.
Oh, Uncle Sam. Oh, tax time? Tax time. Oh, yeah. All right. Forms. Money. Deduction. Exemption. Away. Deduction. Addition. All right. Here you go.
Your money that made America great. What
Yeah.
it is.
Democracy. Yeah. All right.
So, hon, how about going to the State Department?
It's groovy.
All right. Hey.
Yeah.
How about a new dress?
Hairdo.
Hey, how about some nice... Look at you, you scare yourself. Yeah. Take some laundry. Yeah.
Those are only $5. They hang on your computer monitor.
What are you doing here, son? If you're
I'm unemployed.
so hard.
I did that my life as an accountant. Now I'm taking a computer. I'm going to try to open the store. Well, the longest job I had was 3 years. I've had 3 3-year jobs.
12 different planes of consciousness. Just
I've heard of that.
I'm dabbing it now. I think it's dangerous. What'd it charge you? I found it. It's real drama. What are you doing here selling if you're so educated?
I'm unemployed.
So am I.
I spent my life as an accountant.
The problem is, I gotta bring his up. That's the problem.
What's the problem, sir?
I want to know who's in charge, and I'll tell you what the problem is.
Democracy. They think they're afraid that if too much communism comes in, that we're gonna have that it could come in here. But I believe that we're strong enough to just take care of ourselves, that we don't have to control a lot of other small countries.
The newspapers don't give it enough coverage. The TV. We don't hear what our government's doing as much as they should know, the involvement.
If our political process pulls together, Soviet and Cuban-supported aggression can be defeated. On this, the centennial anniversary of President Harry Truman's birth, it's fitting to recall his words spoken to a joint session of the Congress in a similar situation. The free peoples of the world look to us for support in maintaining their freedoms. If we falter, we may endanger the peace of the world, and we shall surely endanger the welfare of this nation. The speech was given in 1947. The problem then was 2 years of Soviet-supported indirect aggression against Greece. The communists were close to victory. President Truman called on the Congress to provide decisive aid to the Greek government. Both parties rallied behind President Truman's call. Democratic forces succeeded, and Greece became a parliamentary democracy. Communist subversion is not an irreversible tide. We've seen it rolled back in Venezuela and most recently in Grenada. And where democracy flourishes, human rights and peace are more secure. The tide of the future can be a freedom tide. All it takes is the will and resources to get the job done. In April 1983,
Get up.
Let's finish first, at least. Come on.
Keep going.
Oh, amigo! Long time no see. ¿Cómo estás? All right, everything's going good. Oh, a little un regalo. Oh, por democracia. Oh, muchas gracias, amigo. Oh, a present. Oh, qué bueno. This is for our country. Thank you very much.
It's just a 5-minute sketch. We'll be done in a minute.
Right. Thank you, senor. Qué bonita. Corporal! Corporal punishment! At once! Corporal, I want you to instill democracy in our people. See, with bullets, I mean, with the ballot. We want you to get the ballot from the peasants. Make sure they vote in a democratic fashion.
I will get out the vote.
Do your duty for our country.
For democracy.
Hey, I know what you mean. Hey, I fought for the country.
Holy Mother of God, we had struggled so much against the oppression in our country, but our fields are being burned by the army. My husband was killed. Deliver us from our despair and give us strength to struggle against the oppression in our country.
Some things you can't prove.
Never know how much you care. When you drop the bombs upon them, you walk away like you're just not there. You give them fever when you hurt them, fever when you tell all your lies, fever in the morning, fever that hides all the light.
Aren't you advocating the overthrow of the present government?
Not if the present government would turn around and say, all right. If they'd say, Uncle, all right, come on back into the revolutionary government and let's straighten this out and institute the goals.
Get the procession, make a procession.
Corporal punishment. Corporal punishment. I want
Watching on the news, they search them before they go in to vote. I mean, what kind of country is that? When you got to get searched just to go vote, you know, who's going to be your leader?
Right. How much can you trust the government, right? Yeah, I heard they have to have their ID card stamped when they vote, and then in order to get their paycheck, they have to show that they, you know, voted. They have to show that stamped ID, so there's real pressure to vote. Yeah.
Well, I know who the current administration, I think, won, didn't they? Backed up by the military, as I recall. Wasn't that basically what it was?
Well, the party that had been in power up until now, still is, I guess, officially, it was the Christian Democratic Party that the United States had backed in the past. And they lost. And the party that won was Arena. It's a far-right party that's been connected with the death squads. I mean, there's been a lot of documentation that they have been very closely connected with the death squads and human rights violations in El Salvador.
I guess my information was incorrect on that then, okay.
What do you think of that? What do you think that means, that, you know, in the midst of the turbulence that you're talking about, the, you know, civil war and popular unrest, you know, a far-right, militaristic, death squad-oriented party wins?
Well, I think that's unfortunate, because I think that's going to lead to more authoritarianism down there, and I think it's unfortunate. I am going to look into this now, though, because I am interested in the fact that I can't understand how a far-right military power, which is evidently, from what you say, is not one that's been backed by the United States, would capture power. And it seems to me that what you've got then is, and again, I don't got information, I have to read up on this. It appears to me you've got two power struggles then going on, which really are outside of what we would consider the people, and that would bother me a little bit if that's correct.
The roots of the struggle in El Salvador are in El Salvador. You know, they didn't came from other countries, or like Russia or Cuba or even Nicaragua. The thing in El Salvador is that, you know, and I tried to explain this thing. This is not, you know, that this struggle didn't start in 1980, how most of the people believe. You know, what happened in 1980 is that the repression became more deep. That's it. But this struggle starts since, since even before 1833. Mm-hmm. And I mention those cases because those specific times, like 1833 and 1832, were, you know, when big, you know, actions from the Salvadorian people happened, and when big massacres at the same time from the army happened. So it's, you know, we have those experiences now, and it's something that, what I believe is that they try here to justify in the eyes of the North American people why they have sent already $3 billion in 8 years to El Salvador. Mm-hmm. Why they don't spend that money here with the homeless? You know, we don't need that military aid in El Salvador. So they need to justify with something. How they are going to justify that with the $3 billion that they have spent in El Salvador, 65,000 people have been killed. How they can justify that? They, you know, the only justification that they can do it, and the most important part is that the North American people believe that justification. Mm-hmm. The thing, for years and years and years, they have been telling to the North American people that they are sending that money because of Russia, The thing is that the United States, they have some economic interest in the region. So they need governments in the different countries that support and defend those interests of the U.S. government. Like, for example, the canal in Panama. For example, how important it is for them, for the U.S. government, that kind of interest. So the North American people need to demand, proofs, so because are your taxes that are going down to Salvador.
That's right.
So you need to be worried about other wars that are going on in other countries. Even especially when it's your government that is sending that money.
In El Salvador in May of 1986 with a group of 84 North Americans that went down there to find out what was going on, how our money was being spent, and find out what was going on with human rights violations, and then come back here and let people know what was happening. Well, we met a group of Salvadorans in the National Cathedral in San Salvador, in the capital, and they had come from a village outside of San Salvador because the military had come into their village and bombed their homes and machine gunned the fields and just about burned everything that was there and killed people. And these people were, the reason they came to the cathedral, first of all, was because they refused to go to the refugee camps that the government wanted to take them to. They saw it as part of a counterinsurgency plan, and they didn't want any part of it. They weren't, in any shape to really be talking with people and having tape recorders stuffed in their faces and cameras and all that. The man that we spoke to the most seemed to be really affected by what he had just been through, and still in a state of shock, in a state of trauma. His hair was just standing up, and his eyes were dug out, and he was just a very thin man and looked very sad, and I don't know, I felt, weird bothering him, but he talked to us, but he wasn't very coherent. It was hard to figure out exactly what had happened. He told us, as much as he could about, when the military came and what they did, but when you got to ask him, for example, if any of his family was killed, he couldn't respond. I mean, it was apparent that they had been killed, but he wasn't able to talk about that. So, but they had gone and put up a display of information about what happened in their village. They had posters showing exactly how many people were killed. Like, they had the number of orphans that resulted in the bombings in their village, in a period of 1 month. And they even, said, this is how many children lost just their mothers, and this is how many children lost just their fathers, and this is how many children lost both mother and father. They had, charts about how many cornfields were burned and how many acres that consisted of. They had numbers of how many houses were burned in each, village of their department for like 3 departments. So they wanted people to know exactly what the Army was doing, exactly what U.S. money was going for, and they knew that, that bombing and then the Army's attempt to get them into a refugee camp was part of the same counterinsurgency strategy that seeks to resolve problems in El Salvador, by military means, and they weren't going to accept it, and they weren't going to be a part of it, and they were telling President Duarte no, and they were telling the United States no, and we're just going to stay here until you let us go back to our homes. You may have heard about the Mesa Grande refugees from Honduras, that 4,000 people at once went back from a Honduran refugee camp into El Salvador and back to the places that they came from, despite bombings, despite machine gun firing, despite constant vigilance by the Army, despite the fact that the Army tries to keep supplies from going in there. They're doing it, and they're holding their own. I mean, people have been killed, but they've organized agricultural cooperatives and schools and health clinics and community governments, local governments, neighborhood councils, that kind of thing, and their own sort of security so that they can stay there. I mean, they still are being hurt, but they're saying, we're going to do this, we're going to stay here, and if enough of us do this, we'll be able to succeed, and we'll get to stay where we want to stay and do what we want to do, and we won't be used by the government to continue a needless war in our country.
Todas las madres salvadoreñas, a Ronald Reagan le pedimos un favor, que se ponga la mano en el pecho y ya no mande tanta depresión, que se ponga la mano en el pecho y ya no mande tanta depresión. Ronald Reagan, escucha esta voz, que las madres que sufren gran dolor y por eso, por favor, te lo pedimos, que ya no mandes tanta depresión. Y por eso, por favor, te lo pedimos, que ya no mandes tanta depresión. Ronald Reagan, búsquenle sus hijos, si los quieres con todo tu amor. Ay, es duro ver tus hijos muertos, que se mueran por tu represión. Ay, es duro ver tus hijos muertos, que se mueran por tu represión. Ronald Reagan, nosotros te preguntamos, porque ayudas tanto a El Salvador.
I don't know how El Salvador can be a threat for the national security of this country. You know that the United States, like Bush said, is a strong America.
Our tax dollars are paying for it. No, you don't have to use that.
What can the people here in the United States do about the situation in El Salvador?
There are different things that you can do, but I just would like to focus on 2 or 3 things. One is that you really need to clarify yourself what is going on there. And this is one way how you can do it, trying to bring Salvadorians to Albuquerque to be concrete. You know, to really tell you what is going on there and to give their own testimonies, not only the FMLN representatives, but refugees and all different sectors. The second thing is that I believe that here in Albuquerque, there are some organizations that are working with the Rapid Response Network, and that's something very important because that means that at any moment that any Salvadorian is captured in El Salvador by the army, you have the power as North Americans to release those people with only one telegram that it's going to cost just $3 or something, less than $5. So that's something very concrete that you can do. And the third thing is that for the people who are not, doing nothing right now in terms of the anti-intervention movement in Central America, we believe that it's important to get as broad as possible this movement to oppose to any U.S. intervention or invasion from the U.S. government to Central America. So those are the 3 things that I really would like to focus.
Very good. We need to learn more about El Salvador, and then we need to stop sending money to finance the war.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And what do you think about the war in Vietnam? Was it worth it?
The war in Vietnam? Not really. Look how many millions or thousands of soldiers were lost over there. And the people here can't even get nothing, the benefits from their husbands, for the women especially.
So what do you think about a war, a similar type war in El Salvador?
It's still going to be the same thing. We're going to lose out. Everything's going over there for nothing. What do we gain out of it? Nothing. It's just the same as in Nam. What do we get out of it? Nothing. We don't get no housing, no good housing. We don't get no good schooling. We don't get schooling for our kids. We don't get food for our children. We don't get nothing really. Come down to
And
it.